and then I'll let you guys know how I'm going to post this later. I'm not sure where I'm going to put that yet. So we'll figure it out. Cool. Let me go ahead and just start sharing my screen. We'll go ahead and look at the Xi books for Lab 1. Cool. Can you guys see this okay? I'm going to take no news as good news that you guys can see it. All right, cool. Thank you. And then I think I just paused it. Okay, there we go. Cool. Okay, so for Lab 1, this is pretty much just data visualization. So it's basically just getting output to look nice, like output formatting. Not a whole lot of logic. Obviously, it's programming, so there's inherent logic in it. But more of the thinking of this lab goes into more of the output that you guys will be producing. So before I go over the stuff, I'll just give you general ideas of how it's supposed to look. Obviously, all of this is available for you to see. This is basically the spec of the lab. So you'll basically be outputting tables that look like this and tables that look like this. So you can see that there's kind of specific formatting here. This title is centered. There's centering here, obviously centering with the lines, and then there's like formatting left, and then there's formatting right for the numbers. So all of this will be done using a couple functions. You don't have to just print out a bunch of spaces. One of the big things you guys will be using to get that output looking that way is set W, which takes in an integer. And basically, it's just a string manipulator, and you can specify how many characters the next output should be. And it looks like there's some information about this within Xibooks itself that might be pretty helpful to look at. I personally haven't looked at it, but if it references it, it might be pretty helpful. And then the other functions you guys are going to need to be familiar with are the get line function. So this will allow you to get input for strings, including the spaces. And for this lab specifically, most of the time your first parameter is going to be a CN, which is actually the input in C++. I believe you guys may have done that with Lab 0, if I'm not mistaken. And then input is going to be the string you're reading it into to actually store it. There's a stoi function, or STOI, which is basically string to integer. So it's basically going to take in a string and it will actually convert it to an integer. One of the big things to keep in mind for this function specifically is if you put in a string like this, like Batman, or anything that isn't a number, it will actually throw an invalid argument, which leads to the next thing where you guys will need to do something with a try catch block. So the basic format of this is you're going to put a stoi function inside of the try block. And basically, if what happens inside the stoi throws an invalid argument, it will be caught by the catch, and then you can print out errors related to that, which the lab will expect and go over. And then that's pretty much the big things of this lab. That's all I had to really go over here. One thing I can show you guys is, and you may have already seen this when you Google C++ related things, but if we just go to stoi, for instance, you just do anything relating to C++ and type in C++ after it, you'll get C++.com, which some of you guys may have already be familiar with. I don't know if Fox showed you guys this specifically, but this is an excellent website. It's basically C++'s documentation. So I can run you through. This is the basic format of what you're going to see for the most part. So you can see like what library it's a part of. We can see it's a part of the string library, meaning most of the time you will actually need to include the string library in to actually use this function. So that's already pretty helpful knowledge. And then it goes over the different ways you can call it. And then the parameters it takes in, it defines each one of these parameters that it's taking in. And then it gives usually a pretty helpful example. And you can actually just like go ahead and copy this and run it in your own IDE. Or it has this button, which I've never actually used before. We can see what that does. Okay, cool. Looks like you can just run this here if you want to. I'm not really familiar with any of this. I would have just copied it and run it, but totally up to you guys. So this can be pretty helpful, and you can go in and play around with this and see different outputs. So that can be pretty helpful. And then it shows the output here if you don't actively want to run it or play around with it. Um, and then key thing here that we talked about is exceptions that it throws. So you can see that it actually throws an invalid argument exception if no conversion could be performed. You don't really need to know what invalid argument means, but if you want to, you can click on it and read up all about it. Another helpful, let's see here, see what this brings up. So when you guys are doing this lab, you might need different attributes of strings like lengths and sizes and things like that. So if you did string C++, same website, obviously. This is the string class, and it basically goes over all of the functions that this class has. So if you're like, what can I do to a string in C++, because it's kind of pretty different than Java, come check this out and you can read up all about strings. I can go ahead and dump this in the Zoom chat for everybody, for the lazy folks that don't want to Google it. And you can go and check out all this stuff. It's pretty helpful. A lot of times, if students come to my office hours and I can't remember something offhand, because there's so much about C++ to actually remember, I just go ahead and Google this, and this is the first thing that I look at. So it's a solid starting point, especially for this lab. So, are there any questions on the lab specifically, or about anything like of this that I showed you guys? Cool. Okay. So that's that on the lab. This one is pretty quick to go over. As the semester goes, there'll be more and more to talk about with each lab. That's just inherently how things go in courses. Labs just become more involved and a little bit more challenging. And then if it hasn't changed anything, you guys should have 3 projects this semester. The days I talk about the projects will be a little bit more in depth. Just letting you guys know that projects will take a little bit longer to talk about. Obviously there's just way more information to go over. So okay, cool. With that said, we can go ahead and go over to what I've typed up for you guys here. So again, this is just dealing with classes. Let me go ahead. I've got some notes here just to make sure that I go over everything with you guys. So a lot of what I'm going over here too is relative to, I think, not the quiz you're taking that's due today, if I'm not mistaken, but this will be helpful for next week's quiz. So that's going to be something I do in each lab as well. Is pretty much the material I'm going over should be relatively helpful for the quizzes. And I'll be doing that like a week in advance. So I'm mainly doing that to keep on schedule with my Wednesday section as well. Because I have 3 labs tomorrow that if I went over the quiz you had today, that's not very helpful for them. So I'll just basically be a week ahead, just so you guys are aware of kind of the scheduling I'm doing. So let's go ahead. Cool. Can you guys see the code? Okay. My little bar disappeared from. Okay, cool. Okay. So let's go over some of the class stuff. So first things first, this is a header file. It's a .h, and then this is a source file or a CPP file or a like C++ file, mainly referred to as just a source file. Where's the quiz today? I may have misspoken and may have freaked you guys out, but I think there is quizzes, and I haven't kept up with the due dates. It looks like he may have extended 24th. That is this Sunday. Looks like he may have made, and you guys can check me on this because it might be different for you guys, but The quiz for the introduction to C++, it looks like it's due the January 24th. So that actually might be a week ahead. But what's weird is, and I don't know if he extended this for people coming into the class late. Okay, but the next one's due 26. So actually might be a week ahead. Well, next one's due the 26th, which is next Tuesday. So it looks like you guys have two quizzes that are kind of overlapping, and then after that, it will basically be a week apart from each other. I think the reason that there's two, that's one due the 24th and one due the 26th, is just for students that are joining the class a little bit late. He gave you guys some time. Someone can tell me if I'm wrong if you go look at your Canvas, but I believe you have the first quiz due the 24th and the next one due the 26th. So definitely let me know if I'm wrong. I don't want to steer you guys in the wrong direction. Okay, cool. So did that answer your question, Joshua? Okay, perfect. Cool. Okay. So yeah, header file, source file, and then a couple definition things is what I'll go over first, and then we'll go like actually dig into the code a little bit. This entire thing here is considered the class definition. So it's basically everything that's going to be inside of the brackets for the class, ending with the semicolon. Big important thing is classes in C++ end with the semicolon. So this would be an error if we didn't have it, where this is the correct way. So make sure that you get that semicolon in there. A lot of people leave that out. We can see what kind of error that might throw. First, let me make sure this runs. Oh, I didn't save it. And try again. Okay. I was messing around with this after my other lab, and I may have messed some stuff up in the middle of that. Give me 1 second. C++ errors are super gross if you guys don't know that yet. I can go back and explain what that was in a second. But let's go ahead and we can see that this compiles fine. So let me go ahead and take this semicolon out. Just show you guys what that would look like. Okay, that's pretty helpful. It basically just tells you to put this after the class. Sometimes leaving out semicolons in C++ can be pretty gnarly, and it thinks you have errors everywhere else when in reality it was just a semicolon. But that one was pretty nice. So, okay. So in C++ in classes specifically, key thing to remember is any variables that you put inside of the class are going to default to private. So not public, but private. And that's pretty critical to remember because if you go in here and just start typing away variables that you want your class to have, you're going to have issues accessing them unless you put a public keyword in front of everything that you actually want public. Even though things default to private, you can also add the private keyword in front of things. This is mainly, I guess, for organizational purposes. So you can actually recognize just looking at this, like, okay, these are in the private section. And then if you wanted to, you could also add like another private section, like down here. So that's another reason to have these words, is so you can keep alternating between like public, private, public, private. There might be some edge cases in which you'd want to do that, but for the most part, there's usually just a private, one private and one public section. So hopefully that's kind of clear. Some more things definition wise. Anything that with like getters or setters are going to be considered accessors. And with this is it's not that get and set are keywords in C++. These are just words that as developers we have chosen to give these function names because they're pretty obvious with what they do if you call them get and set. And I think you guys probably went over this in programming 1, if I recall correctly. So I think that concept you guys are pretty familiar with. Another thing to note is that these, regardless of whether their accessors are considered declarations, and basically the difference here is that we're not actually like defining what these functions are doing. We're just declaring that they're going to exist in memory. And the definitions are going to be in your source file. They don't have to be, but organizationally, they are typically put in the source file. it basically breaks up your code a little bit more, and adds another layer of like organization for the developers. If you're writing a relatively sizable application, you're going to want things to be a little bit more organized as opposed to dumped all in one file. But you know, kind of depends on what you're actually doing. But in this case, I think it was a little bit better to kind of split them up. So cool. And then you have constructors. So you have a default constructor that basically doesn't take in any parameters. And then you have a constructor that takes in parameters that you can actually set or manipulate or do things with. Something to keep in mind is that in C++, you can only have one default constructor. So not two, not three, but just one. You can have a couple of constructors, but default, there can only be one. So cool. Let's go ahead and move over to the source file and kind of dive into what is actually happening in these getters and setters. Pretty much in the gets and the sets, the same things are happening. But basically in the get age, we're just returning our age variable that belongs to our class. And in the set, we actually set the age based off of what was passed in. So a couple things to note here is that we need this keyword because if we didn't have it, and I'll demonstrate this later, but basically what's actually occurring here is you're setting this variable age like to itself. So it never actually touches the variable that's on line 11. It's just setting age to itself, which isn't actually what we want to do. And the problem here is that it's going to totally let you compile this fine. It's not going to throw any errors because it's like, okay, if you want to set a variable to itself, that's perfectly legal. But logically, it's not exactly what we want to occur. So we need this keyword here to show that we're actually referring to this age as opposed to the other age. A couple things you might see out in the wild is that some people prefer to put like an underscore in front of or after their variables. So when you come over here, you can actually just do this. So now the compiler understands that age with the underscore is obviously this one and not this one. My personal preference, I like to use this keyword. I like to name my variables the same thing. But other people might swear that this is the best way to do it. And if you guys go out in an industry, you'll probably have like the company that you work with is already going to have a standard, and you'll just jump on with whatever they're doing. So just letting you guys know that you might see a couple different things. Another option that I think is way less used is naming like this input could be different. So if you wanted your private variable to be age, you could name this like input age, right? Although I think this is maybe a little bit less common because like input age is just kind of a weird variable name. So, but you have a couple options. Do whatever you got. There's no wrong way or right way. It's really what makes the most sense to you as a developer. You're the one writing the code. You're the one who needs to understand how it works. Other than working inside of a team, obviously everybody needs to kind of agree on what's going on. But yeah, I think someone raised their hand. So do you have a question?
Yeah, I have a quick question. So
yeah.
What I was wondering, do you think it's best to have like, for example, like two files? So you have the main C++ file and then one header, or is it better to have like three, one for definitions, one for declarations, and then one for just the main program?
That's a really good question. So often what you'll actually see is the latter of the things you said, where you do have one other thing for main, like one other file for main. And the reason this is because then you have like I've named these student header like student.h and student.cpp, and those are like their own contained things, where your main is what is considered the client. It's what's considered actually like using the student class. So I think the latter of the ways you said is better to have like three files. And often what you'll see when you are doing the labs is that's what Fox has set up for you guys. He would have like student header, student source, and then just a main. So I could easily go in here and just do copy all this over. And because this is a little bit like the organization is a little bit better here. But with I think the only reason I kept it this way is just so we can scroll and kind of see what's going on. But the latter of the versions is probably much better to actually have a main out there. So that was a really good question.
Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. All right, cool. So let's see. So yeah, that was that on the set. These getters and setters are pretty much the same. They do the same thing, just with a string as opposed to an integer. Something important to keep in mind too is when you define either functions outside of your class definition, meaning outside of this these brackets. Excuse me. You need something called the scope resolution operator, which is the two colons here, paired with the name of your class. So you can see student is here, and that's what all of these are out here. If you put, like, let's say I defined this, actually we can do, let's say I defined this here, let's get age. That formatting's terrible, but if I define this here within the class definition itself, then I don't need to put the scope resolution operator. The reason I don't need to put it is because it's already inside of here, so it knows what it is. And you'll see some labs where you actually do end up defining stuff inside of the class definition as opposed to having another source file for it. But you'll see that case when we get there, and I'll explain like kind of why that is. But for now, just I don't want to go that far. For now, just think of the declarations in the header and definitions in the source. Cool. So are there any questions on getters, setters, or I guess, yeah, just getters and setters. Okay, cool. So I'll go over the constructors. So with the student, this is the default constructor. What I've chosen to do here is give each of these attributes that we have their own like default value. So the name of the student is, just NA, like not applicable. They haven't entered anything yet. Their age is defaulted to 0. If this was like maybe college or something, which I think it is, it would be like 18 maybe is what you'd want to default, but I just put in 0. Again, you're the developer, it's up to you. And then the year is just 1 for like, freshman. So this is kind of your default values. And then you have another constructor, which would be like your actual constructor if you wanted to fill in all of these elements as you actually construct the object. So that just passes in the name, the age, and the year. And you can see that we've done the same thing in the setters, basically, where we set all of these elements or attributes of the class to whatever the client passed in. So we can go over like what's actually happening here. The first thing I'll do is just run this first half where we can see, figure this out. Okay. And if I run this, basically what we're going to see here is, if I can get to it. Cool. It prints out student class just so we can prove that we're like in this main here. And then, actually, I want to do, that's fine. So we can see we've made 2 different students here. One is Trevor, which used the default constructor because we didn't actually put anything after the name of the class. And then, or excuse me, the name of the object we're making with that class. Where on 48, we're using the constructor itself because we're actually passing in parameters to the object that we're creating. So both of these students, while they're being constructed, are using 2 different things, like 2 different constructors. And then what we can see here is when we print out like Robert's age with the get age, what we can see is that it prints out 22 as we expected, because that's what we're passing in. And then we print out all of Trevor's attributes, the age, the name, and the year. We can see that all of these are, in fact, the default values. And that's what we expect from right here. So Does the default stuff make sense? Did like all of that make sense to you guys? And if it didn't, ask questions. Some of this you probably have already like seen. I'm obviously just reviewing stuff that you guys have done in class that I'm trying to hit home on. So, okay, cool. So let's just recompile this after adding all this stuff in. Now I'm actually setting stuff for Trevor. I'm giving the age of 23. I'm setting a name, Trevor, and then 55 is going to be the line 55 is going to be the year. So he's just a fifth year. And what I was trying to do and show you guys here is that because these are private variables, we have to use the setters that we used. But for year, I've just trivially made it public just to demonstrate this to you guys. And here we don't need a getter, or excuse me, a setter. We can just set that outright. And that's going to be pretty much the core difference between these public and private variables is either you have to use setters and getters, or you can just manipulate it outright. Within the context of this program, having things public and private is kind of trivial, and you would argue and say, well, hey, all I'm doing with the setter is exactly what you did down here. So why not just make it all public? And I would say that you're right, and we probably should. Where the importance of private data members comes in is, let's say within the setter, we were trying to maybe like restrict a certain like age groups. Like let's say you had to be 18 to enroll at whatever university this is. You could do something within the setter, like if the age is greater than or rather less than, I guess, less than 18, then you could probably end up printing something out here that's like student must be 18 to enroll in college. And again, this is pretty trivial, but I think it demonstrates the purpose of having private data members. And basically now we can protect the data a little bit more rather than letting this this thing be set. So we can go ahead and demonstrate this, where we can do it right now. It wouldn't work for line 53 because we actually didn't do that check in here. Let's pretend we did. So if we made Trevor 18 or 16, I guess, what we'll see is that when we print him out again, his age is actually still 0 because that age never changed within the setter because we put a guard that basically made sure that it was greater than 18. And we also printed this flag out that basically says student must be 18 to enroll in college. So that's kind of where you get the importance of like setters and getters. You're just like protecting the data to make sure that you're not getting weird data that might either not be allowed in your system or might actually mess your system up. A lot of times that has to do with like, negative numbers or invalid characters or anything like that. So hopefully that kind of makes sense. And then the thing I got off on a tangent there, my bad. The thing I was trying to prove is just that these things actually changed when we did the setters and did the getters, so we can show that our getters and setters like actually worked. And that's hopefully what I'm proving to you guys here. So are there any questions? I got a couple things to show you regarding like errors and stuff, but any questions up to this point? Cool. Okay. So let's see here. So the one thing I was going to show you was, I'll do it with the name. This is what I was talking about earlier, so I'll just demonstrate that. If we didn't use the this keyword, basically what we can see is it doesn't actually cause any errors when we compile it, because it's like, sure, man, you can go ahead and set the name to itself. But when we actually try to do this, you can see my name never actually changed to Trevor, and it just stayed as like not applicable because we're just setting its the own name to itself. So hopefully that's clear. There's I've seen this error a lot with students that come into labs and stuff, and they forget this keyword, and it seems broken, and then you just throw that on, and it seems to fix the issue. So Nothing to note is that this keyword always gets used with the arrow operator here. I'm not sure how much Fox talked about it. Right now, just accept that it uses this arrow operator. But for those of you familiar with pointers, it's because this keyword is a pointer, which I think you guys will learn about either this week or sometime next week. So just so you guys know, this is a pointer. It comes with the arrow operator to use it. This will make a little bit more sense in the next coming weeks. So one of those things that you just kind of accept and then you'll learn about a little bit later, which happens a lot with programming. Cool. So then there was one other thing I wanted to show you guys, and then I can let you go or help you guys with whatever you need. So get rid of this one and throw this guy in here. And this may or may not break. Okay, it worked. Cool. So what we have right here is actually could be a default constructor. So basically what I've changed here is instead of having to define these things within it, which is a little bit more typing, what I can have is actually just all the default stuff within here. And this behaves like as a default constructor as well as a constructor that can actually get overwritten, except that didn't actually work. Give me 1 second. There is definitely a way for a default constructor to look like this, where you have all the parameters in here. But right now it doesn't seem to work. Let's see what this does. Okay. Cool. There we go. Okay. I just had to add this stuff in here. So this is the default constructor, and basically what will happen here is if, like for Trevor, for instance, we actually didn't pass anything in, even though it can take parameters. So basically, if we didn't pass any parameters in, it just takes the default values that we had before. You can see that here, where the age is 0, the name isn't applicable, and the year is 1. Whereas Robert, we actually passed stuff in. So it still went through this default constructor. It set everything here, but then it basically got overwritten because we actually passed stuff in as parameters. Yeah, I just saw your message, Kristen. You were right. I still needed what was in the brackets. Yeah, thank you for that. And then, yeah, so that's basically a way to do a default constructor that kind of combines the two. Depending on what you're doing, you might have some cases in which you can't just do that. But this is a way for you to have a little bit cleaner default constructor that also pairs with the constructor. But this is referred to definitionally as a default constructor because it has default attributes. Something that would not be a default constructor is if you did something like this, because now we don't actually have any default for the name. So this no longer becomes a default constructor, and it's just another generic constructor. Where something like this would be helpful is if you do expect people to input stuff, and basically age and year just get defaulted to 0 and 1 if they don't enter them. But definitionally, this isn't a default constructor. So, and then I kind of lied. There was one more thing I was going to show you, and you kind of just saw it on accident, but it reminded me that, excuse me, if, let's go back to this one. If we didn't initialize this stuff like within a constructor, then basically, so we'll do this and we'll nuke all this stuff. And then, cool. Basically, if you don't have anything being passed in to your object, it's going to get initialized with a bunch of garbage. So we can see that the age is like 32764 and the year is 65535 and the name is probably just a bunch of empty characters. If we were to run this again, you can see that these things actually end up changing. This one stayed the same, which is interesting. This one seems to be off by one number. Sometimes you can get them to be drastically different, but this one seems to be pulling the same memory address. But what's happening in the computer is basically it just is making these variables, which are just basically a name that's associated with a memory address, and all it's doing is just printing out whatever was stored at that memory address, just randomly. And we refer to that as just like garbage. That's what you would just call like garbage. We can tell that it's like a big number that doesn't make any sense for our program. You guys will probably see this a lot as you're programming. I still forget to like initialize stuff properly. And the big thing here is just there should be a little like light bulb in your head that goes off when you see stuff like this. You're like, oh, that number is just totally chaotic. I don't know where that's coming from. It's probably because you didn't initialize anything. So just keep that in the back of your mind pretty much the entire semester. The biggest thing that gets people with is when they have like a count variable that they in their head is starting at 0. And then they use that count variable and it's messing up their whole program. And then they realize they never actually initialized it to 0. So their count variable was starting at something like 65,535. So just giving you guys some insight there. Okay, now I'm pretty sure that's all that I had for you guys. So hopefully this was helpful. For next week, you can like message me on stuff you like want me to go over in lab, just so I can actually go over stuff that you guys need. Hopefully this wasn't useless to you. Feel free to give me any feedback that you guys want, whether things were helpful or not. So I'm always up to change what's going on. My biggest goal here is just that you guys do well in the course and understand the material. So cool. If there's any questions, feel free to ask them. If not, I'm here to help you guys with Lab 1 or any of the material. If you're heading out, you guys have a good week, and I'll see you next week. And good luck with any quizzes you guys got.
Thank you again so much.
Yeah, no problem, man.